to Sky Fire News, the best UFO show on the internet. Sky Fire News is on the internet. Sky Fire News. Sky Fire News. Fire News. Yes, sir. Sky Fire News, the best UFO show on the internet.
What up, everybody? Those are plants. Welcome to Sky Fire News Live. It's Tuesday. As you know, we got a special guest. Julian Dorery is going to be joining us. He just dropped a nice interview with Darcy Weir on USOs and actually a lot more. They dove into a lot of stuff. And Julian's been doing a lot of work out here on these podcasts, and we're really appreciative for it. We got Red Panda Koala in the mix. Red, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Tupa. How are you? Can you hear me?
He is. Yeah, you sound good, man.
Woo! Yeah, I'm excited to talk to Julian. Have fun. We talk about maybe some of that Carl Nell stuff that happened.
Dude, are you talking about the SALT conference that just took place?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just heard about the SALT conference last year when Gary Nolan was on it.
Friend of the show.
Right? And so like what was the takeaway from this year's? Was Carl Nell the Gary Nolan of this year's episode, or was there more?
Yeah, I'd say even more so.
Really?
From the believer camp, I'd say it was pretty hyped up. In the skeptic camp, it was treated as a trust me, bro. But maybe we'll react to some of that with Julian here and get his take. I'm excited to see what he thinks, right? Because he's done a lot of interviews, right? Mm-hmm. And he's talked to a lot of UFO people. So see what his takeaway after a few years in this space is, what he thinks these things are.
I love getting their opinion on this, especially people who talk to a lot of different people, like in the CIA and ex-government guys and stuff like that. Like, you know, I'm used to talking to people on Twitter. Sometimes a guy rolls into Spaces, and you're like, okay, what's going on? What's going on, Eric Weinstein? And you can get some really good conversations. But doing it for a living is a whole different ball game. The chat is alive. The chat is alive. I see someone use the Roswell Police badge, their new logo, as their avatar. Good work. Good work. Believe it or not, that is the official Roswell Police logo. It's going to be wild. All right, without further ado, we got to get Julian in the mix. Julian, welcome to the stage. How you doing?
Woo, what up, Julian?
Good. What's cooking, Tupa? What's up, Red? How are you, man?
I'm great, dude. Excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. Yeah, you just posted a video today with Darcy Weir, and who was the other guy that was on there with them?
Andy Marshall.
Andy Marshall. Like, they really knew their stuff. You got Darcy going into like history, naming names all the way throughout. Got like
he kind of blew me away. Right? He has a wide scope.
He knows.
I learned something, and I think you might have learned something too. That he did a documentary on Dan Schneider back in the day. Dan Schneider's the guy who blew his hand off and said that aliens blew it off from the deep underground military bases. And then he passed away, and they found a catheter wrapped around his neck.
Yeah. How about that? That was very Epstein. That whole story. I saw that. I was like, I don't know about that one.
Very strange.
Like, yeah, he had a heart attack. Oh, by the way, we found a catheter wrapped around his neck. Must have missed that the first time around.
I mean, he was really out here blowing whistles. I mean, he was talking about like a lot of heavy stuff, and I was surprised to find out that his father was, what was his name? Something Schneider. He was plugged. He was a German plug guy. So Otto, I believe his name was. But yeah, Darcy's an interesting character. For
sure. I'd talk with Darcy, just kind of on the side for months and months and months, and then I saw his documentary. It was actually really, really good, and it's a topic that I think in a space that almost has like too much coverage now, too much noise. The whole USO, the submerged phenomenon, I think is a little undercovered, and I have a lot of questions about it. And as a armchair, not expert, just someone curious on the outside, it certainly can lead to you wondering some things beyond just aliens, if you know what I mean. I mean, my head more goes towards, hey, are these like DARPA weapons? Is this the stuff where they're 40, 50 years ahead? And to me, it's all intriguing. Whether or not, I kind of don't have a goal of the end expectation of like, ooh, I want the aliens to be here, or ooh, I want to know that it was UFOs or whatever. It's more like there's some wild shit happening in the world, some stuff that's unexplained. Don't really care what it is. I just love to know, and it all has different, very different implications. I heard in the intro there, you talk about Carl Nell, which I've seen some of that. I haven't heard what he said and actually watched any video of it, but I understand like he came forward and said like the aliens are here. Again, just like you guys were alluding to, you also wonder, even someone more, I think even more someone sitting in my seat who sits across from government agents, sometimes you always wonder like, all right, is that true? Or are you saying that for some other reason? Is that your job to say that? Which I can accept, but it makes it certainly cloudy.
Yeah, you don't know who to trust or when to trust them.
Yeah.
And you can't even trust your own perception anymore, right? So it's like, okay, you got to really, I think it's all about big data collection. You know what I mean? What do a lot of cases say? What area do they kind of point in, if at all? But other than that, everything is up on the chopping block.
That's right.
But these USO things, I mean, these are spooky. A lot of people back it up.
Yeah, and the nuclear component to it obviously makes you go, God damn it, again.
Of course, right?
You're like, there's something there. We used 2 of them. And then all these things started happening, like it does make you wonder about that whole, like James Fox's story with Bob Salas. It's like a baby playing with matches, and they're like, up. You're not going to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to see, how did you get into like podcasting and then the UFO conspiracy space? Where did it all begin for Julian Dorery?
Yeah, so I'll give the real truncated story of getting into podcasting, because we could be talking about that for a long time. But essentially, like, I had to do it. It was the very beginning of the pandemic. I'd had a side hobby of, if I ever did a podcast, I'd do it right. So let me research how to do all the equipment and stuff. And then I ordered it March 4th, 2020. The whole world was crashing. I was trying to leave at the time. Had already said I was leaving, but was still on Wall Street, technically working at the time. So clients were freaking out. Money's going down.
Were you in the heat of it? The heat of Wall Street, like what people picture, like that craziness?
No.
Is that where you were? Or?
No, that's a great question. When people say Wall Street, they have this monolithic term. There are a million different types of things on Wall Street. I worked in what's called ultra high net worth, which means that we manage people who, I think the average net worth on our book was like $80 million or more. We focused on every aspect of their financial life. We were their quarterback. They took a shit in the wrong place and it cost money, they called us, right? Whether it be something as serious as investments or managing the cash flow on a company, which could be a public company that they may be working at. We did work for some public companies on some more simple stuff like 10b5-1s, sometimes something really easy like a 401k, which is like a joke to do. That's just a great in. But I was in that space. And so, yeah, like people were freaking out because the market was going. And so I forgot I ordered all my equipment. I get a notification on Friday, March 13th, the first day of quarantine. Your equipment has arrived downstairs. I'm like, holy shit. I pick it up, bring it up to my apartment, put it on the couch. And, you know, I just stared at it and I'm like, you know, Julian, you have done a lot of stupid shit in your life, but this definitely takes the cake because all your new job opportunities just went and they just dried up in a second. All your future is completely unknown right now. We are in the middle of this, whatever it was, 2 weeks to stop the curve at the time. Like, who knows what it was going to be. And I had no money. I spent whatever money I had on it. And then, you know, I'm not sure how long it was, if it was 30 seconds or 60 seconds or whatever, but I stared at it. And then I said, well, if not now, when? And then I got a phone call from my dad sometime like shortly after that. Maybe it was a couple days later where he was like, yo, you know how they're saying 2 weeks to stop the curve? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's bullshit. He's like, this is going to be a year. I'm like, what? No, we're going to be back in the office in April. He's like, no, you're not. He's like, do not re-sign your lease. Come back. I was living up in North Jersey by New York City. He's like, do not re-sign your lease. Come down here and ride this thing out in South Jersey, where I'm from. So I didn't re-sign my lease. I came back down there April 1st. He looked at the equipment. He said, what the fuck is that? I was like, you know. And he's like, all right, well, there's the back room. Go for it. And, you know, I could have never done it without my parents. I mean, I put everything I had into this, and I only recently took off like 2 weeks. And that was the first time I've ever taken time off in the 4 years and 2 or 3 months I've been doing it. But the first 3.5, we're building it in a studio in my parents' house that I never could have afforded the rent on if they didn't let me do that. So it was, to me, like also theirs, not just mine,
Very
which
cool.
which is really, really cool. But that's how I got into it. And I think the second part of your question, Red, was how I got into the UFO part, right?
And general conspiracies and like the topics you chose for your podcast, right?
So the topics I choose, and you can see it more now, right? The first 86 episodes, if you had a pulse and an ability to move your mouth, you were qualified. You were coming in, right? We were just setting the precedent of long form podcasting. I'd have my buddies come in and we'd have conversations and I'd clip it up. And that's how I ended up getting the podcast to go. Then I started to get people who wanted to come in, you know, started with Rajaratnam, ended up being David Satter, some guys who had, you know, they're not like famous people online, but serious clout in their careers and some level of fame. And what happened was the topics went from anything I wanted to like a little more focused like this for a while as we got into like episode 120 to 140, kind of stayed like that. And then 140, 160 stayed like that. And then I started to open it up again. And I'm starting to open up. And now every episode is something different. And it's going to keep going more and more like that, which in the long term, I think is great for my show because it shows people I'm going to do whatever I want to do. In the short term, it's not the best for the algorithm because YouTube's algo is constantly guessing what I'm putting out. But we have a really good baseline, which is why I've now picked the time to do that. But as far as like, you know, some of the conspiracies and stuff, I get a lot of shit for being a guy who will shoot some things down. You know, I look at it based on whatever facts are put in front of me on something as a podcaster. And I always remind people, I'm a podcaster who launched a podcast in a backwards hat in his parents' house. I'm not fucking Albert Einstein. I'm not the Ministry of Truth. Like, you know, take my opinions or don't. That is totally your right. And, you know, you shouldn't be looking at me like when I get some texts and DMs from fans, like where they're basically, they might as well say, as an expert on X, can you please tell me what you think of this? And I'm like, all right, that's not the case. I'm just an asshole with an opinion like you. But, you know, there's some that are so clear that we cover. You know, we've covered JFK in here, obviously, like guy was whacked on camera, right? You know, and then there's broad things like UFOs. Forget the word alien for a second. And that's certainly a part of it, a big part of it. But like, I look at it like, okay, we have had things happen. That's real. What is that? You know, let's try to figure out what it is. If I can get some people in here who know a lot more and, you know, I can get them talking, I feel really confident in my ability to do that. Maybe we'll get somewhere, you know? So it's tough. Sometimes you risk making the wrong call with the types of topics you cover. Knock on wood. I think that's only happened one time where it went the wrong way. But, there's some where it's like, oh, I know this would have done a lot of views, but I don't like the evidence, and I'm not going to comment on what those are too, but you can actually think of at least one of them. I know I talked with you about it, but it's really just, I do it on a case by case basis, right? Like, it's totally like, okay, what do we got here? Number one is, am I interested in it? If I'm not interested in it, I mean, I have plenty of examples of this behind the scenes. I don't care if you have 10 million followers. It's not fair to me to fake it for 3 hours. Right. As one example, there was a huge WWE guy who awesome dude, right? Who was like, yeah, I'd totally come on. And I was like, I've never watched WWE in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't, it's not fair to you. You need to go on someone's podcast who knows what they're talking about. Right. So that's number one. Number two is there an angle to it that I feel like it can go off into like a river, like a tributary off rivers? That's the way I look at conversations. You start it wherever it is, and pretty much what it is what it looks like. I turn the cameras on, we're already talking, I sit down, and we just keep going. And that's kind of where the stream starts. And then, is it the kind of thing, is it a person who thinks enough, reasons enough, talks enough, has command over different types of, subcategories of the topic to be able to get creative, where I can kind of get them going, and we form all these different lanes that happen throughout the podcast? As long as I see something that tells me that is going to be able to happen, I'll do it. And so when it comes more specifically, granularly to the UFO stuff, again, it's like I said a couple minutes ago, I try to look at the evidences that the person wants to present a little bit, just high level. I'm not sitting there studying it like crazy, but just like, okay, is there a conversation to be had here? And is it for the right reasons too? Obviously we get a lot of grifters in spaces like this. I think it's all over the internet. You try to avoid that. And, if you don't do your due diligence, you risk kind of running into that.
When did you realize how weird the conspiracy UFO space is, in terms of, like, you have grifters, you have counter intel people, there's like a religious kind of element, because some people have really strong spiritual beliefs about it. Were you prepared for that when you first got into it, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I also want to say Swiss Army Uber there is mentioned in Andrew Bustamante. We can come to that later. That's certainly a fair question. But that's also a great question, Red. I would say I was extremely naive to that. As someone who, even like, the way I got, I think a while ago you asked this and I forgot to answer this. The way I got into UFOs, just to be clear, when I was growing up, I always thought, like, oh yeah, there's life out there. I mean, it was like I assumed it. It was like, duh, like, mathematically there has to be, but that's where the conversation stopped. I was never this dude watching alien documentaries, reading alien books, learning about UFOs. I knew jack shit about it. And then the kid who now is my producer, Alessi Alaman, he is really responsible for getting me into it in 2021, because he had like a podcast on the side in college. He did an amazing job with it. And he got James Fox to come on there. This is like early 2021. And James, who's like such a good fucking dude. Yeah. Just such a...
He does so much for the movement and educating people, and his impact, I guess, is huge.
Yeah, but like off camera, off Twitter, the best guy ever. Like almost uncomfortably nice. So James does this podcast with this kid at the time who's like a sophomore in college, gives him an hour and a half of time. And at the end, Alessi says to him, hey, obviously, I know you're going to Brazil this summer to film this new documentary on the Varginha incident. I have really no qualifications that I can speak to because I'm in college, but I swear to God, if you let me come, I'll come down there and give you coffee, whatever you need. Would just love to be a part of it. And James was like, all right, I'll tell you what, if you get a flight down there, you're in. And he told us later, like, he shut the computer. He's like, I'll never fucking hear from that guy again. And so 3 months later, doop, fucking little Alessi with, at the time, like his Karen haircut with like the frosted tips, shows up to Brazil and says, what's up, James? And James goes, Oh, hey, how are you? We got a room for you right here. And he like takes Alessi to a hotel room. There's like a guy sleeping on there. He's like, hold on, get the fuck up, get out of here. Like, this is for this kid. Yeah, we got it right here. Hold on, I'm gonna have the maid come in and fix it. And then Alessi actually became like a kind of producer on it. Like you'll see him, he's doing the simple stuff, like doing the director's cut thing. Yeah, he was in that for that. But he also filmed some of the most critical footage on his iPhone in the documentary. So when they are at Eric Lope's house and shit was going down, Alessi was in the car ready to go with, I think
that was him. Oh,
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was with, is that guy's name Carlos? I always want to call him Pedro, but one of their dudes who was like the man on the ground in Virginia. He and Alessi were in the car, like with it ready to go in case.
You break down real quick. What happened there, right? Because there was some mix up, or there was like a threat. What was the breakdown there?
So when they were sitting in the car, they couldn't hear what was happening, but James and maybe like 3 other people, his camera guy, his audio guy, and the translator, were standing by the side window of this house. And a guy who we now know to be Eric Lopes was sitting in the window. And the vibe looked off. And James is also, he doesn't speak Portuguese. So he was very delayed on this because he was so excited. It's really funny to watch back because this guy's literally like threatening his life. And James is like, yeah, so can I get a question? and the guy's
trying to find the clip, but I don't know if I can find it.
But the guy, I think James posted a preview of it in like maybe I want to say December 2021, something like that, January 2021 on his Instagram page.
Okay, that might be.
I want to say we talked about that in episode 85. I'm pretty sure we did, and that was in January. So, or filmed in January at least. But yeah, so Alessi and I think it's Carlos saw the body language on everyone else, and they're like, "Oh, something's off." And Alessi just like turned his camera on. He's like, "All right, let me just sneak out there and get this." And he got up there right when the guy was kicking them out. The guy had a gun underneath the window, and he's like, "If you don't leave right now, I'm going to kick you out with bullets." And of course, James is like, "What'd he say?" And the lady translator's like, he said, if you don't leave right now, he's going to kick us out with bullets. And James is like, but can I get my question? And they're like, no, get the fuck out. So Alessi gets that. And then he got James turning around like, holy shit, that's Eric Lopes. So, he ended up like being a big part of this, which was really cool.
That's incredible.
So naturally, and I like to be a skeptic on things.
I found the video real quick too. Let's watch it together.
Let's watch it.
Yeah, this was wild. I remember when this happened. This was crazy. I think it's not going to let me zoom in though, but we'll still be able to see it. This one, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. Yep.
We're trying to get answers. Vamos aqui em busca do Eric Lopes na casa.
That's the 2 of them in the car.
Com a equipe já, vamos ver como vai ser recebido. Espero que não sejamos recebidos a bala. Oh my God.
There's Alessi.
Oh, nice.
Now he got out. He's so like innocent too. It's so funny.
Oh my God.
It's just like, oh, let me go get some footage. Guy's only got a gun in the
I
window.
want to be there. Come on.
Now they're telling him, I'm going to kick you out with bullets. It's like right there. And James is a little late to the party on that one. He's still trying to get his question in. And she's like, dude, we gotta bail.
Oh, wow. James Fox W still trying to get it the whole way through.
Yeah, dude, James is about it. There's a lot of things. You can say whatever you want about him. He's about it. Like, he wants to get it. And now you see him turn to the camera like, holy shit, that's Eric Lopes.
What happened?
And the mic guy was like,
O que ele falou?
he was spooked.
So help me understand. This was a witness that they had found, and then the witness changed their mind. Is that what happened? Or?
So Eric Lopes was the guy who was in the car with Marco Ceresi, who's the soldier who died after allegedly picking up this creature.
The Virginia one, right?
And Eric Lopes, I hope I'm remembering this right. Eric Lopes ended up marrying Chirazi's sister, and she does not talk with her family anymore because they will never talk about this. Like, it's a real, and he remained in the Army, at least for a time. I don't know if he still is, but there's a lot going on there. I talked about, James and I went through this in episode 139 and really went deep into the case on my podcast, but there's a lot there. And I got to give James a ton of credit. He knew this going in. I told him I was going to grill him like a Philly cheesesteak on this because we got it. It's an extraordinary claim. We got to get extraordinary evidence. I thought he did an amazing job in that episode. And he also wasn't afraid sometimes to say the words, "I don't know," which I think is critical because people want to have an answer for every goddamn thing sometimes. And it's not really possible,
Especially in this subject, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Alessi, to get back to what we were talking about, Alessi throughout 2021 in the build up to this, and then especially after filming this and getting back from Brazil, was just all over me like, dude, you got to look at this more. It's fucking crazy, all this stuff that's happening. And I kind of got bit by the bug. I was like, nice. Okay. And then I started sitting up at night without weed and asking questions that I hadn't really asked in the past. And I didn't do content on it right away. Alessi and I did episode 85. We filmed it in January 2022 and put it out like a couple weeks later in February where we talked about it. But I didn't do any episodes on it. And then we were talking with James all throughout that year, and I was becoming friends with him. And I said, all right, I think James is definitely the right first guy to do this with. So we did 2 episodes when he came down, put him out in February. I think it was like February 25th, 2023. And then like March 4th, 2023, that was 138 and 139. And then, sporadically, I've done some more from different angles. I've had in guys who are hard skeptics on stuff. Brian Keating and Lawrence Krauss certainly have some interesting arguments. I've had in people who have outside the box opinions, like Dr. Hugh Ross, that was at least interesting to listen to. I've had in Dr. Michio Kaku, who does, for what it's worth, and talking to him off camera as well as what you see on camera, he's very scientific about it and wants proof on things and has questions about stuff, but he absolutely, to me, believes there's life out there and believes we need to do more work on it. And I think he's backed that up with, what he's done from a media perspective over the past maybe 3-4 years. And then I had in Nick Pope, also really interesting stuff. And then today I had in Darcy. So I think we've had a good overall group of people from across the spectrum on this thing. I try to work it in there a little bit. I want it to be a piece of what I do. I don't want to force content on this with people. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm curious, like every other person out there who's ever looked at this. Like, I'd love to know. I'm also a realist on, that there's things that for whatever reason, maybe we can't know, as much as that pisses me off. And that's where it gets like above my pay grade too, because it's like you don't know what that is unless you saw what it was. And the whole question of this whole thing is we want to see what it is in the first place. So it's kind of like an endless closed loop that gets a little hard sometimes.
Yeah, you get like really interested in it because you want to see something, and then like by the end of it, you have to accept that you may never see it. But you have to accept that it's there. It's kind of wild. You mentioned that you like widened your scope of the kinds of shows that you do, and I think that actually like lends itself to getting really interesting, well-informed people from the UFO community on your show,
right?
Because it feels better. I think at least someone who really enjoys the UFO community and the search, I guess, or whatever, right? Like, and I guess I've seen it for a long time. I've been interested for a long time, and so it's great to see. People kind of flock to your show, even Danny's show.
Danny's killing it,
dude. With credibility, with credentials. You got authors, really deep researchers in there. What is the most refreshing UFO take you've heard from like all your guests?
Kaku definitely was pretty refreshing because it was a true scientist take. I would say.
What did he say?
Well, he said a lot, but some highlights. Number one, he has a lot of trouble when you're talking about the way we've reported aliens being here, and yet there's no physical evidence that anyone has. Like, he's like, steal a pen, steal a pencil, for God's sake, steal a piece of metallic, whatever. But no one's ever giving me this proof. So until I have it, I can't have it.
It's a good impression. By the way.
It's a thank you. I haven't worked on that one in a while, but he, it's almost like everything he says, you got to be like, yes, like he's such a smart guy. It's almost holy, but I think that's a fair argument. I know James has talked about a couple times where he thought there might be something that exists, but again, he doesn't have it. So that's fair. He also talked about there being the potential for, and this is where it gets a little weird, but like half, if I fuck this up, I'm sorry, people, but it's in episode 145, so you can hear him say it. But there's like half biological beings who would act and appear as human beings who could be here from another dimension. And furthermore, the thing that really changed the game for me with him is how he looks at the potential for interdimensionality. And when you get to like, oh, there being 11 dimensions and what that could mean from a time travel perspective and an alien perspective. And the example I like to give that's my own little, just like, Monday morning quarterback, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. But if you look at the movie Interstellar, Matthew McConaughey lives as an age on the Earth. He leaves the Earth for whatever it is. It ends up being 80 years worth of time back on Earth. And he returns at a time where he is still a certain age with a certain knowledge level. And everyone who's there is different or dead, right? They're either very old or dead, and they live in a different world. So he's an alien in my book, right? So Michu talks about the future human perspective with interdimensionality. This is something that Philip Dick was pretty obsessed with. I need to do a little more work on Philip Dick, but the stuff I've seen is pretty incredible, like that guy's mind and how it worked from a science fiction, but, science philosophy also perspective. If you look at The Man in the High Castle, which was a short story he wrote that was later turned into a show on Amazon that was really good. I think it was a few years ahead of its time. But, that concept of like, oh, in this case, they're saying Germany and Japan won World War II. It's 1964. Here's what the world looks like. And there's these tapes that show the alternative of the Allies actually winning the war in a past time. And it has to do with switching between dimensions and basically time travel. So when Michu works in the future humans,
real world.
Sorry,
Oh.
I didn't mean to play it.
no, you're good. When Michu works in the future interdimensionality, the future humans and interdimensionality aspect of like the alien question, that is a very scientific, theoretical scientific, we have to say that, but interesting take on it that also, like, it's funny how it ties together because you get a guy like Brian Keating who is very skeptical of a lot of this stuff, very skeptical. And some people get annoyed at that, but I think he's a really good sport about it, and I enjoy talking with him. But like, he wanted, ironically, one of Brian's life's work, like something he's talked about a ton, and he wrote a book called Losing the Nobel Prize. He spent 15 years in remote, I think it was in Antarctica, somewhere very remote, somewhere cold as shit, trying to prove that the universe was inflationary. And again, I'll mess up how he did this, but it had to do with measuring like different light rays in the atmosphere. And it turned out after 15 years that this thing that they thought they were discovering actually turned out to be like dust, which sounds horrible, but it was like, like dust matter within the universe that was shaped in a different way or something like that. But essentially, that concept of the universe being inflationary is something he does think could at least the way I understand it, could very well be. And without me explaining what that means from a scientific perspective, the next layer to that everyone out there can understand right now that he's explained is that if you proved that the universe was inflationary, that would effectively all but guarantee that there is a multiverse, which means there are these different dimensions that involve people from different time periods, travel, and interdimensionality, which goes right back to Michu's argument.
No, that's that's actually really fascinating, and I like that you used Interstellar too as like an example, because in that movie, a lot of people look over the fact that what Matthew McConaughey says when he's inside that tesseract, right? That's just built of all these different moments. Is that he tells the robot that it's future humans that built it. It's like the only people who
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
care is us in the future. They've just evolved beyond the physical space, and they can't locate time in space. They're beyond that. So they
Yeah.
had to like basically build it and then allow ancient or a two, like a flatlander, essentially what would be that to them, go in and find it using their senses about them. Very interesting film. It uses like intuition, love, like it's like very metaphysical, and
Yeah.
it didn't really need to be. The original script was a sci-fi film written for Steven Spielberg by Christopher Nolan's brother.
Actually, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's really good. It's a really good script, but it's like such a space adventure. All the elements are there except for the love part. That's like removed and replaced with like spaceships and guns. It's actually kind of cool. But yeah, Interstellar is really good. Good example.
I got a question. Here we go. Boom. Danny Jones. You guys are pretty close, right? And I don't know. He's a cool dude. I feel like it's nice to have friends in this space, right? It's one thing to have friends you can talk to about like UFO stuff, but then also get it on like you guys are both interviewing people, you're getting guests, like having someone you could lean back on, like many ways like me and Tupa, right? We could talk to each other about some of the weird stuff that just general fans of the subjects might not get. How did you come to know Danny, and like what's your guys' relationship like? And
Yeah, he's one of my best friends. I talk with him pretty much every day, and I know he's a huge resource to me, and I hope I'm a huge resource to him as well. I hope he'd say that. But just an amazing guy, incredibly great at what he does. Also, still extremely underrated at what he does. Very humble, and the way we met is actually pretty cool. The universe aligning. Someone had come to me in January 2022 and said, "Hey, what do you think of the podcast Concrete?" Because at the time it was called Concrete Podcast. And I was someone who prided myself on knowing pretty much anyone and anything doing well within podcasts. And I'd like to say at the time I did, but I didn't know it. I pulled up the channel. I'm like, holy shit, how have I never seen this? So, I had 3 screens in my studio at my parents' place, and I would work late at night. And so sometimes I'd throw podcasts on the 3rd screen while I was working. So in January that year, I threw on his podcast. I ended up going through like 6 of them. I'm like, this shit's fire. And then about 3 weeks later in February, he DM'd me on Twitter, which I didn't even tell. To this day, I don't even think I put my Twitter link in anything. It's like the one social media I've never really even told anyone about. But now some people have found me there. But at the time, maybe I had like 200 followers or something. Like it was not active. And he DMs me like, hey, man, some of my fans hit me up and pointed out your podcast. Huge fan. Would love to hop on the phone. I'm like, son of a bitch. Same thing just happened with you. So we hopped on the phone and, it was like stepbrothers. Did we just become best friends?
oh, cool.
And that was that. So we invited each other on each other's podcasts. I went on his for, I think, episode 133. He was on mine for episode 102. And, he wanted to talk to my guy, Jim DiOrio at the time. And then he said, I want you to talk with my guy, Andy Bustamante. An FBI for CIA Fed trade.
Good trade.
Yeah, it was a great trade because, the Bustamante episode, like my whole thing, the only reason I exist is because I would edit these crazy clips. And back when I was doing all that. And so with Bustamante, once he and I finished recording, I looked at him. This was like April 2022. And I was like, you ready to be the biggest CIA spy in the world? It's like, yeah. So, okay. And then I made like 7 clips from that episode. They did like 100 and some million views on YouTube. And then he went on every podcast after that. So like,
you were the first one to put him on, really?
Well, no, Danny was.
Oh,
Danny did 3. This is the genius of Danny Jones. Danny did 3 podcasts with this guy over the span of a year. At the time, maybe they did, I think it was like episode 70, 84, and 127 on Concrete. So Danny Jones podcast. And all within about a year. At the time, they had maybe 200,000 views, 400,000 views, and like 100,000 views. But Danny wasn't a clips guy. He wasn't a viral clips guy, at least at the time. And so he was like, yo, you should get this guy in there because you can make the clips go nuts. And I'm like, I'm sure we could. Would love to talk with him. And I, at the time, again, the only reason I exist is because podcasts weren't making YouTube shorts. And I was spending 25 hours on 35-second YouTube shorts and making them perfect. And so like at the time I was inventing how to do that for podcasts. So I averaged 4 million views per clip. Damn. I did, which for the time I put in, I fucking better. Right. But, it was a cool time where, for a year there, I could kind of do what I wanted. And I knew bringing him in, we'd be able to do that. I also know like anything you do CIA is, there's going to be people who are like, yo, fuck this. But I can't really worry about that. My thought is like, if we're going to have spooks, I'd rather have them sit in front of me,
Yeah.
and let you guys judge it. And like, I don't shy away from saying it all. Like Andy's a good friend of mine. People will do with that what they will, but like, it's not how, like, I see people talking about this on the internet, like how they think this stuff works. And it's so funny. They give like podcasters way too much credit, but he says what he wants to say. And I can confirm for you that he says things that piss the CIA the fuck off. So
really?
do with that. Oh my God. Yeah.
Which things do you know?
I'm not going to talk about that on here, but that is not an opinion. That is a fact. You do with that what you will. He certainly has some opinions that I disagree with him on immensely. He has opinions that he changes my mind on. He has opinions that I agree with him on. And he's really fun to go back and forth with because he's a really, really sharp guy. And like he's almost like an over-the-top realist. No, not almost. He is an over-the-top realist on things, to the point that you need some of that. And then some of it, it's like, okay, all right, let's back that up a little bit. But really, really interesting guy. He's been really good to me. And, people are always going to question that kind of thing. But like I said, when I talk to some of these guys, I'm very selective with the spooky people I bring in. But when I do, it's a matter of, well, at least they're sitting right there and at least there's a camera going so everyone else can see it too.
Yeah.
You're seeing it the same way I am.
What did you think about his read on like Chris Bledsoe and the Skinwalker Ranch, like brain scan stuff? Because I mean, even Danny had an experience with Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah, Danny. I've talked with Danny a lot about Chris, and it's such a. That's one you go back and forth on a ton. And I'm not going to speak for Danny on that. I know, like, you've talked with him. I think you talked with him on February 22nd about that when you guys did a live.
Yeah.
But,
I'm so good with dates and numbers, bro.
I know, dude. He's like fucking Grant Cameron, bro. He's like, he's on there.
I got that photographic memory. It comes in handy sometimes. But, Chris, when I talk with Andy about Chris, I guess I talked with him like around the time Danny's episode came out. He had some contact with him, and he was just very matter of fact about it. He's like, yeah, no, the guy definitely sees some shit. I don't know that Andy thinks he sees what Bledsoe thinks he sees, but take it for what it's worth. Andy's the guy who will undoubtedly be like, yo, fuck that. When he thinks something's not real, like he's very like he has no time for bullshit. For him to say like, yeah, Bledsoe's tapping into something, that gets my attention.
Yeah. He said that he watched his brain like change in real time, like right in front of him.
Yeah,
like something was going on because they connected Bledsoe up to the whatever brain scan thing while they were having him have an experience or look at an orb or whatever. And sure enough, something. He's
a part of that show now, right? Andrew Bustamante, like full time.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
he also said, and it's worth noting on that show, he was very skeptical about doing something like this because he knows Andy Bustamante in reality TV. That's the funniest marriage I've ever heard in my life. But they talked him into like trying it out because he's like, "There's no way you're gonna let us do it for real." And he's like, "They let us do it for real." He said the worst thing they do is like sometimes him and that dude in the glasses on the right will have this like big brain conversation on camera where no one fucking knows what they just said. And at the end of it, the producers will be like, okay, can you do what you just did, but just say it like a fifth grader? He said sometimes that happens, but it's really what you see. They have to edit it down to whatever it is, 30-minute episodes or whatever it is. But the projects they're doing, how they're doing it, what they're exploring, it's all real. And he also, I know he mentioned this on Flagrant when he went on there, and I think that was in March, but he doesn't think it's aliens, but Andy does believe aliens exist. He has the same opinion I do in the sense that he's like, it's like a mathematical impossibility that they don't. But he doesn't think that the things we're seeing right now are aliens, which you could take that multiple different ways. Two of those ways are certainly is he just a paid spooky guy to say that? Or B, does he kind of know something? I don't think Andy was, all these guys do different roles, right? It's not like Andy was like undercover in, Asian country X. And then one day they're like, hey, Andy, can you stop by DARPA? It doesn't really work like that, right? Like they're all in their own silos, but he's very connected. He knows some people who could know things or could tell him they know things that they really don't because it's disinfo. Again, you got to ask all these rabbit hole questions like that when you're dealing with this. It's only fair. But, he's one guy I've spoken with on some things. I've spoken with other people who will never be on the podcast in some cases, just, shooting the shit with people I get connected to. And, from what I can gather, there's certainly some advanced technology that would blow our minds. What exactly that is, or whether or not some of the examples I get are true or not, that's a fair question up for debate.
Who do you want to interview in the UFO space? Like, who's your dream gets?
I mean, Michio Kaku would have been like top of the list. Like, that was definitely cool, especially because like his people asked to come on my podcast, which I thought was a joke. It's like, all right, guys. Like someone reached out to me on email and it was a late night. I was working hard. I'm like, haha, funny joke. They're like, no, this is real. So that was really, really, what a great guy. Like really, really cool of him to do that. But in the UFO space, I would like to talk with Grush.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I know Jesse Michaels has talked with him. Jesse's coming on my show at some point.
Nice.
It would have been earlier. Like, he's a great guy. I talked with him towards the end of last year for a long time, and we text every now and then. But, like, he was going to be coming on a lot sooner because he was going to be coming out to New York and just stopping through, but he hasn't been through New York. So whenever he does that, we'll do it. But I had a really interesting conversation with Jesse about Grush. I've talked about that a little bit. I'd rather him, like, kind of explain it because he can do a way better job. He's known him for, like, 3.5 years.
Yeah, I was surprised to find that out.
Yeah, which is interesting. And, I think the guy has he comes across as credible on a lot of stuff. It doesn't mean everything he's saying is true.
Mm-hmm.
There could be kernels of things that were left, like, oh, peanut, like squirrel getting peanut on the way there. We're all susceptible to that, including very talented people like him in a high position within the government. There's a lot of people still above him. A lot of things we don't even know about, I assume. But he would definitely be a guy I'd like to talk with. Tim Gallaudet, who Darcy and I talked about, and Darcy is trying to hook that up, by the way, which is really cool.
Oh, nice. That's very cool, Darcy.
That would definitely be one I'm curious about because he hasn't talked a ton. Whenever I'm put on the spot with this stuff, I forget people that are so obvious to me that like I think about. So I feel like I'm blanking out on a few right now.
I mean, honestly, Lou would be cool too, right? Like, I would talk to Lou. Would you want
ever
Lou on?
interview
His
Lou
book
Elizondo?
tour? Yeah, his book coming
I've
out?
heard. Was it you who was telling me this, Tupa?
Uh-oh.
About Lou? There's like a pre-interview check with him or something. Was that you?
Yeah, I've heard this. That like Lou's very, very selective about who he does interviews with.
Yeah.
At least during his like initial like kind of podcast run, right? He was very, very careful. And there seemed to be a limit on questions and pushback and whatnot. It kind of seemed like let Lou talk and then go forward. This is what I've heard allegedly. So
Let me give my opinion on Lou so that I'm not misheard on any of this.
Okay.
There's kind of two camps with him, right? There's the people who are like, yay, Lou, woo, we worship every single thing you say. You're trying to get the truth. And then there's the people like, yo, fuck you, bro. You're a spook. Fuck you. All this shit.
yeah, those are the two sides for sure.
Right. I'm not in either camp other than, yes, he has literally said on the record that he's a government agent. And I gonna paraphrase what he said because I won't remember the quote exactly, but like
We'll pull it up.
I think he
Yeah, we
said
have it
I think he
memorized.
said I'm an intel guy,
Yeah.
right? And meaning like I still am. So people look at that and they go, disinfo agent, spook, terrible, hate you. I look at it like, okay, I respect that. You have a job to do. You know things that I don't. Whether or not I agree with the job you're over people are telling you to do or not, I can't even say because I don't have access to that information. So do your job. But I don't have to listen to what you say and take it that seriously. It doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to you. But if I assume that it's like some level of deception, then that's my right to do it. It's nothing personal. I don't hate the guy at all. I think that's fine. Like he has a job to do. But then when it comes to my podcast, you say, would I talk with him? Yes. But number one, not to do a gotcha interview. I don't do that. And I don't do that.
The chat has questions about that.
I very much don't do that. I'd be happy to fill people in on that. And number two, I'm not going to do a full Lou gives me. I've never done a prepared question for a podcast in my life. You think I'm going to let that guy give me prepared questions before he goes on when I already think he's doing a job? No. And that's no disrespect. I would tell him this to his face. I assume he'll never see this, but like if he did, I'd have no problem with him seeing me say it like this. Is what it is. So like, yes, is he very interesting? Sure. But if there's like goalposts on how it's done, respectfully, no thanks.
Yeah. And here's that clip, by the way, the famous one.
Left the Department of Defense, ironically enough, to finish the very mission they gave me in the first place. I didn't ask for it. I'm not a UFO guy. I'm not a ufologist. I never have been. I never will be. I'm a counterterrorism and counterespionage guy. I do counterintelligence, counterinsurgencies. That's what I do. And it just so happens that in 2008, I was asked to apply those same skill sets into the UFO community.
Interesting quote. He would be number 33. But yeah, I bet he's also probably extra locked down after like everything that happened with Lou reviews and stuff. I'd imagine he'd want a lot of control. Like the Jesse Michaels interview. I was on Jesse Michaels like 2 years ago, and Lou was supposed to be next, and for whatever reason, like Lou kind of had an issue with it going out.
Interesting.
So, yeah, he's very and Jesse said that publicly. You know what I mean? So
yeah, Jesse's really subtle about how he does it, and that can. Yeah, I mean, kudos to him, man. He's really good at it, and like you almost don't expect it. He from the content I've watched of his that's like fire. He's very unassuming about stuff, makes you very comfortable, and a guy like Lou might be like, "Ooh, I don't want to get lulled into something here," say things I don't want to say.
Well, there's that interview that Jesse and Eric Weinstein did with Hal Puthoff, and Jesse snuck in like this really interesting question. Weinstein was playing the piano, and he was playing a song, like a pop song from the 80s, and he asked Hal if he recognized it, or Jesse. He goes, "Jesse, do you recognize this?" And Jesse's like, "No." He goes, "It's a cult classic." And Jesse immediately turns to Hal Puthoff and goes, "Speaking of cult classics, weren't you in Scientology?" It was so smooth. It was crazy.
I think
and then he gets him on the spot, and then Hal's like, "Oh yeah, whatever, dabbled with it." It's so interesting. But wow. when I saw it, I was like, dude, the ball's on Jesse, man. Like,
yeah, he's got a set on him. He's got a set, and like he's very, like I said, when you talk with him, such a chill dude.
Yeah,
he's so unassuming. That's why it works, and I respect it a lot. Like, and that's why his channel's like so good.
Here's that clip Tuba was talking about.
Hal, weren't you in Scientology?
Oh, years back, I checked into it because at that time we were doing, setting up a remote viewing program. We were checking into everything. Yeah. Silver mind control, Scientology, whatever. I thought some of the techniques were definitely of value, but I disconnected from them in the mid-70s or whatever.
Yeah. Jesse Michaels W, because I think Tuba said, right, he doesn't get asked this a lot, right? So
no one would have asked him that question. Because I think they were either taking a break or at the end of their interview, something. But the way he edited this in too was just really interesting. He asked the right questions, and then I like when he pairs up with Eric too, because you can tell that he's just like he's way more open than Eric is, and he gets Eric into these situations that he wouldn't normally be in, talking about these topics that he wouldn't normally talk about.
Well, Jesse was the producer of The Portal. Mm-hmm. Like he goes way back with Eric. So I think I agree. Like he's able, he has a real great relationship with him and can get a side of him, I'm sure, that none of us ever could.
No, it's cool. He's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did a space, or sorry, you did a show with Matt LaCroix,
Mm-hmm.
and he dives into these really ancient like things. Like, what'd you take from that interview? Because it seems it's so much. I love the guy. He's on a lot of shows.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah. So I've had him on 4 times because I brought him in twice, and both times we did 2 podcasts because he can go, man. I mean, he's like, and I'm like, all right, we'll do another one. But first of all, Matt is so passionate about his work. He works extremely hard. He gets some brilliant stuff. I talk with him. I've said it on air with him, and we've had long conversations off air. I feel like sometimes, like if he went to here, if he would just stop there, because that's where the evidence was, and not go here, it might be a little better. But like the evidence from here to here is pretty good shit, depending on the subject matter. And this guy, he loves it. He eats, breathes, and shits it. He will sit up and read ancient texts for 10 hours. Like that's what he does. And you want to talk about being a novice on subject matters? I love history. The shit he goes all the way back to, I'm learning. I'm like, really? Wow, tell me about that. It's so fascinating to me. But I started to get more interested in that 3-4 years ago about like the history all the way back. Like, yo, when did we really start on this thing? Where did we come from? When did we go extinct? Like let's not just go with the 6,000 year creation thing. Like that's obviously not the case. So what was it? And I think there's a lot we don't know still. And I do think the risk in that space, like it kind of goes back to the universal law of physics I always talk about. It's one of my favorite things. For every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction, right? And they offset each other for an equilibrium. So we see this in every part of our culture to a high degree now, higher degree than ever because of the instant communication of the internet with everyone. But when there's a camp that forms, the other camp may start right here and very quickly it's going to work its way here. And so you get like a canceling out of each other. And so on one hand, you may have guys like Zahi Hawass, who fucking sucks, who's like this, gatekeeper. He looks like the jerk off in the movie saying, "Get off my lawn," except in the Egyptian language. And it's like, that's not good because these people want to tell everyone to shut the fuck up and just take what we say as law, no matter what it is, no matter what lack of evidence we may have for something or new evidence presented that we're ignoring. And then you get the people coming in like, well, no, wait a minute. And then when they say, hey, shut the fuck up, these guys go, you know what? It's all fake. And you kind of get that. So I'm always trying to like be like, hey, let's talk, and I think it's good to talk with guys like Matt because Matt kind of goes that way on stuff. I'm working on getting someone in right now, knock on wood, I hope it happens, that is from the opposite end of stuff that I think is really interesting and presents some amazing cases. So I like to explore that. And then I like to be the mediator. Like, hey guys, let's calm down. Let's work together. And most of the time they won't, cynically, but like maybe the one time they will. And if it started with me just humanizing the two of them, that's pretty cool.
What'd you think of the interview? You saw it, the Joe Rogan interview, the debate between Graham Hancock and Frank Gibble, I think it was.
Yeah, I'm almost done that.
It's like 6 hours or something.
Yeah, I think it was like 4.5 or something like that. But
it's wild.
I'll say this: Flint Dibble is very unlikable. He looks like he didn't get shoved in enough lockers, and I found him more than annoying. And I like Graham Hancock, but I think Graham got body bagged, more like Graham body bagged himself, because this can be Graham's problem. He's too emotional. He came into that debate wanting to settle scores rather than present evidence, and his only calling card seemed to be, well, you can't rule it out, and you've ruled it out, so because of that, it could be true. And then he was like, I can't do his accent very well, but he's like, my partner and I went scuba diving out in, whatever. And when we went down there, it was absolutely not man-made. And it's like, okay, you guys went scuba diving and looked at it. Maybe, after doing psychedelics and said, nope, that shit's not man-made. And that's your evidence. Like, you got to come with better than that. Like, I am not in a mood to root for Flint Dibble. I wasn't rooting for him. But like, there were a few times where I'm like, homie just spit. You know what I mean? And Graham had nothing. It was like the Drake Kendrick thing. Graham was Drake. It's a tough look.
He did. I mean, I remember Graham Hancock had a debate with was it Michael
Shermer? Yeah.
Shermer, yes, yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, it was very emotional. Like, he was like, these very specific instances he really wanted retribution for.
Yeah.
And he wanted, like, Michael to like really admit to it, which I thought some of them were very, very interesting.
Yeah, no, listen, Graham has taken some very unfair abuse from people. I completely agree. Like, the shit that people just label him, white supremacist.
Oh, that was crazy.
Oh my God, all this stuff. It's so stupid. And like, if you've seen the video of him with Zahi Hawass, like, it's so, like, you want to hit that guy. He's so insufferable. And I know it's hard. Like, I try to put myself in people's shoes. Like, I'm a very emotional guy. I'd be pissed off if I were Graham too. But like, one of the things that this job that I'm very fortunate I taught myself before I ever did it was, when things happen in the world, I know I'm going to be on camera now. So I get my emotion out right there when I'm not on camera. And then I calm down and let the logic come in afterwards. And I can still maybe end up at the same opinion. But usually my opinion softens a little bit because I start to reason with it. And I think when you go onto camera charged up, it's a problem. And what's it called? Involuntarily, I went onto camera charged up one time, and it was a problem. And I still am very proud of my work in that episode. I think I did a really good job with it, but I didn't feel good about it. And we've litigated that a lot online. Of course, I'm talking about episode 168 with Ashton. And
Okay,
and
so yeah,
I mean,
let's
I gave him 2 episodes. It was 168 and 169. Don't say I didn't let the guy talk, but there was a lot that happened right before that podcast. And again, this is like right before we went on that had me pissed off. And that's never good to go on camera like that. Again, that said, that's one of my proudest podcasts.
No, I
Despite
thought
me saying that.
I think a lot of people liked it, right? But I used to direct music videos, and I was just a director and videographer, and I used to tell people, like, the things that the camera can pick up on, no matter how good of an actor you are, is anger or boredom. If you're bored or you're mad, like, I mean, so I spent a lot of time trying to get people in the right mood, because it's in the edit. I would always have to edit it too, and I'd be looking at it and I'd say, holy shit, like, this person is like zoned out, or they're mad, they're annoyed. They have some kind of contempt. And so, like, it takes a lot to kind of work that out, but the camera just will pick it up. That's just the way it is. But yeah, so this episode here, if you're willing to talk about it, let's talk about it. Like,
yeah. And I want to say this, a few things here. We litigated this throughout the whole week afterwards, because then a week later he was on Danny Jones. And then on Black Friday, the 3 of us, along with a lot of other people, got on I think it was like a 3-hour and 20-minute spaces. And I said what I needed to say in that. And that was as purely vulnerable as I could possibly have been, and explained my case. You talk about emotion with it. If there's something that in hindsight I wouldn't have done, I would not have angrily taken back the intro from my producer and said, I'm fucking doing it. And I probably wouldn't have titled it that way, but I've never changed the title on Spotify and Apple and where all the podcast is, because that's what it was at the time. So, we'll roll with it. It is what it is. I'm talking about the first episode, which I titled like MH370 Investigator Exposed by Julian Dorey. I've never done a title like that in my life. I did that at the height of anger. And what I don't want to do, and this might be disappointing to you guys and the people watching this right now, I don't want to relitigate all this. I have pretty much stayed away from talking about it in any way since that point. As far as I'm concerned, by the end of that Spaces, Ashton and I made our peace. You know, I think we probably both joke about each other once in a while because there was certainly no love lost with those things, and that's fine. I mean, I assume he does, but you know, maybe he doesn't even do that. But I don't want to put words in his mouth. But you know, I felt like I made a huge fuck up in not vetting him until I had already bought his tickets and his hotel. It's a whole nother thing right there. But when I had already done that and he was already coming in, I was like, well, we got to roll with it. Once I actually did a little homework on things online, and that's on me. But once he got here, I had him for the whole day because he had a hotel that night. So I, without saying anything to Alessi, who picked him up from the airport, and to him, built in that I was going to spend a few hours with him off camera before we went on, which I do not do with guests. They come in here, we get ready to roll. We're talking, but like, boom, we're rolling. He got here at, I think, 10:40 in the morning, something like that. We went on camera at 2:34. Okay. And we actually went to go on camera at like 2:15, but something happened to the mic and I had to fix it for a few minutes. So it was over 3 hours we were sitting here, and I had seen how he attacked people at this point online anytime they even asked a good question. And I tried to help him before we were on camera because my goal was to get him out of here unscathed, which people say that's crazy that you would say that, but that was my goal. And there were some things, I'm not going to get into it again. I don't want to relitigate it, but there were some things that happened right before camera that had me extremely angry that he was unaware I was angry at. And, you know, it was a little tense, but I did not, the first time I had to jump on him with something for real was about 45 minutes into the podcast, because he came back to something that I had already given him a chance to get off of. And so once I try to change the subject, like, okay, you kind of missed that. It's not a big deal. Let's just, you know, slide out of here. And then you bring it back to that and make me have to pull up on the screen here, show you why that's not correct. That's never happened. And that happened in that one episode another 6 or 7 times. Some of them weren't involving the screen. It was just involving a back and forth. And there was one time where I got very histrionic about it because I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. And that is ironically what I used to make the intro. And so I regret letting my emotions get the best of me on the marketing of the episode. But, you know, the 3 hours and, 6 minutes of that episode, I guess the 3:04, that was actually the episode and not the intro. Proud as fuck of that. I mean,
it was fire marketing, man.
Yeah.
That was such a moment in ufology, Hunt Tupa. The Julian, Ashton, Danny, it was so crazy. And then honestly, I'll say I feel like the actual episodes themselves were a lot more tame and like all the hype around it.
I remember you saying, and I agree. That's my point. That's why I will say, and I said it back then, and I'll say it now. Me letting some of the emotions of the fight. There were things that happened in the 5 or 6 days after we recorded the episode before we put it out that I was livid about, that were not from my end. And I said, oh, fuck you. Like I got to a breaking point. I said, oh, fuck you. Like, all right, war. And I didn't need to do that. There had already been public attacks on me. I do need to say that. So I didn't start it. But the first rule is, unfortunately, you got to punch first. And I knew we recorded that episode on a Wednesday. I knew on Friday, before he had said anything publicly based on what was happening behind the scenes, that I should right there go out and not necessarily like attack him, but at least like point out to people, hey, I don't know about this guy. You know, he's saying some things to me behind the scenes, and I didn't do that. And then he started attacking me on Saturday. So, you know, I sat quietly for about 4 or 5 days and then was like, war. I was pissed. That was as mad as I've had hundreds of guests in here. I'm protective of all of them. I've never been even close to that angry at a guest. Never. I mean, it was bad. And the episode itself, though, fire. Love that episode.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to that episode, and I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna let people draw their own conclusions.
No, I agree with you. I think the episode is great. Even I thought Danny's episode was great. The marketing is what made it seem like it was going to be, you know, even worse or even like more contentious or more, you know what I mean? But it was good.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you draw out real emotion, and that's kind of that's a rare thing to see in a podcast that talks about kind of like the topics you cover, right? You know, they're not typically emotional, right? They're not necessarily they're going to draw these things out, and it's an interesting thing to see how people deal with these types of disputes and whatnot in real time.
Yeah, and I want to address something being said in the chat from Solid right now. He said, "There's still no good explanation why you railroad a knucklehead like Forbes, yet let every other Yahoo say whatever they want. Is it all just personality BS? People not getting along?" I take such umbrage to this comment that when I see a comment like that, I know that person's never watched my podcast. Go watch episode 107 with Andy Bustamante. You tell me. You tell me when I literally spit liquor in his face a few times yelling at him. You know, like I'm from New Jersey. I don't back down on stuff. That doesn't mean I need to be mean to you. There were a few times where I felt the record shows Ashton lied on the podcast. And I had proof of it with his own words. I'm not letting that slide. Fuck you. I'm not letting that slide. And that is what it is. Go to an hour, 37 minutes into that podcast. Watch that 2-minute clip. Watch it.
Hell yeah, good response.
Like that's what it is.
I've heard that criticism before, you know, that it was that you don't push back or that you just let everyone say whatever. And I never agree with that anyway. Like, you know, you do speak your mind very plainly, very clearly. But at the same time, you're running a show where you interview somebody, you let them talk, you let them, you know, say their piece and say
that's
their
right.
case.
I'm not there to get them. But if they are presented with evidence that could show that maybe they need to rethink what they said and then they triple down on it, I have to come at that. So like, yeah, I'll use Ashton's next episode 169, as a great example of this. I now know that most of what he said in that episode, and I thought I knew it at the time, but couldn't prove it because I'm not a scientific expert. I now know a lot of that's bullshit. If not all of it. Let's give him some credit. Let's say some of it's not. But I remember, because we stopped the first podcast, I'm like, okay, I got to take a piss. We're 3 hours in, so I guess we're doing another podcast. Stopped to take a piss, went out into the other room, and he was a little shocked from the first one. And so at one point, he walked out of the room, and Alessia and me are in there. It's like dark. It's November, so, you know, we had like no lights on. We're eating like Quest bars, getting ready to go. It's probably like 6 o'clock. And he comes in and he says, you know, I'm going to have to come at you hard with my guy at Marvel, who says that, you know, this is real and all that. He had a guy, I forget the whole backstory. And I looked at him, I said, you should, and I'm going to let you do it, and we'll verify the guy on camera, because I don't have an alternative set of evidence to that. Like, it sounds like a guy at Marvel's saying there could be validity here. You're going to present it. And he was like taken aback. Like, he just thought I would automatically take the other side. I'm like, no. You know, I let him present all this stuff about warp speed technology and all this shit that, like, he probably shouldn't be talking about because he probably doesn't know. He's definitely an intelligent guy. Like, he's not an idiot. I want to say that. But, like, it's not like he's a fucking nuclear physicist or something. But go listen to it. I let him say all that shit. And I shouldn't have, probably. But I did. So if you want to actually use that criticism in anything, you can use it with him. But there are other people where it's like, I do let them say their piece because maybe it's an opinion. A lot of times it's an opinion. I may disagree with it massively, and I may say I disagree with it. But then we're going to move on because it's an opinion. But when you tell me that, oh, yeah, quote, I could totally break down the pilot's door. At 15 minutes, I'd be right in there. And I know it's fucking Kevlar. And it was in 2014, and I can show you 6 Ways to Sunday why it is. And you tell me, well, no, actually it's not. Oh yeah, she could see into the cockpit of the plane from fucking 4,000 feet away. You know how many planes I watched come over here over New York City that now I am cursed for the rest of my life to look at to ask myself if I could see in the fucking cockpit? Not one. Not one. Not in the middle of the night. Not in the middle of the day. Not in the fucking morning when the sun comes up. Not one.
I live by airport. I've never seen inside the cockpit for sure.
I'm driving down the turnpike a couple months ago, right next to Newark Liberty Airport, which has the open landing space right there. And they're coming down at 500 feet at night, and I can't see into it. And I'm supposed to believe this bitch in the middle of the ocean saw it. Come on. You understand my frustration.
Absolutely. Have you seen, not to jump topics too much, but have you seen the Terrence Howard interview with Joe Rogan that just dropped?
I have not yet, so I don't want to comment on that. I've seen some clips. It certainly looks interesting. Please send me some weed. I'm going to get real high, and we're going to listen to that motherfucker.
It's very interesting, and I found Rogan's interview style for that even more fascinating because he goes, I just don't have enough information on any of this stuff to dispute you, so I'm just going to let you talk. And he really, really did have a lot of ideas about a lot of things. And even Brian Keating and Eric Weinstein were having a space before the show started about what Terrence Howard was talking about. Because it's about the periodic table of elements, about there being no zero.
Yeah. I saw Brian's going in on this. Yeah. I haven't talked to him yet, but
they're flabbergasted that he could have said this stuff. But it shows that there's value there to like let people talk, but also pushing back, and it's a delicate dance. I mean, you're doing this podcast. I don't see you stopping anytime soon. You got obviously dream guests for the UFO topic. Is there anything that you'd want to cover that you haven't yet? Any topic that
there's so much. It's just like, I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in a lot of history stuff that I haven't touched on the podcast. I mean, the list of guests I want to have on, I think, is at like 700 or 800.
Oh, wow.
So
nice.
It's like, I'm constantly coming up with stuff I want to do. And it's just like, let's hear what people have to say. As long as, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, my rule is I got to be interested in it. If I'm interested in it and, it's not something really, really boring that like only I would be interested in, we're going to do it. And sometimes I do one that people are like, I wouldn't have done one on this. I'm like, yeah, but I wanted to. And that's why we did it.
That's cool.
It. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Havana syndrome mystery?
So interesting. So interesting. I'm fascinated by that. That could go, that's another one that could go any which way. I definitely think things like that exist. I do think that, I know how far ahead, potentially some of this stuff has to be. It's just a question of what does that tech look like? Because you don't know.
On the show today with Darcy, you mentioned it could be like 40 years, something like that.
Yeah, it could be 40, it could be 50. And Annie Jacobson, who Danny Jones did an amazing podcast with, and now she's been on some other ones as well. Like, I mean, she's talking about like they were fucking with dolphins' brains to talk to him in 1991. Like, it starts getting real weird out there.
Sequest.
I don't know. I'm guessing just like all you guys. Again, I'm a podcaster. So
yeah.
Annie just got her book optioned by Legendary Pictures. Denis Villeneuve, the director of Dune and Sicario, he's going to do he's going to direct a film on the nuclear war book she just dropped. Yeah.
That's really cool. I saw the Pope got a copy of it yesterday.
Really?
Yeah. She like tweeted out like, or maybe it was on Instagram. It was on some social media. Like, never did I think writing this was going to be presented to the Pope, but here we are. Like, she's killing it, man. Her books, the stuff I've read, are unbelievable. Operation Paperclip is.
Dude, there's so much dark stuff happening.
Yeah.
Just from our own leadership.
That's right.
I mean, that's probably never going to stop, right? One of the darkest things I ever heard was her theory, or what she was told, she said, about the Roswell case, where the bodies inside the craft, it was experimental craft, and the bodies were like deformed, and operated on augmented humans. It's so dark. Have you put any thought into that? What do you think that's a possible thing?
I mean, I guess I got to say it's possible. I don't know. I wasn't there, but you know,
it's a dark theory.
I don't. This is the stuff that I sit up at night like, man, I would love to know. Could be this, could be that, could be this, could be that. You know, you could go on and on and on, but will we ever really know? Cynically, I say probably not, because the people that know things, if they're not corrupt, maybe they know from a simulated perspective what it would do from an ontological shock perspective on society. It's certainly something to think about. We all know that. I mentioned it on the podcast with Darcy. It's a legend. I don't think this happened, but it's been told, the story of Jimmy Carter when they came in and read him in. And they left him weeping because they had to tell him that like the religions were an invention of like the aliens for us to deal with our meaning on Earth. You know, if you suddenly told people, hey, everything you believe, it ain't quite like that, all at once, like snapping a finger. I mean, that could be like the purge in society.
Yeah, I don't could handle it, but I don't know if we could.
I don't know if we could, and that's where like maybe the spooky people have an argument, and I hate it. Maybe they do.
Yeah, this might be a good. Let's do this. And this actually is a double good question. We could watch some of this Carl Nell stuff from today because he's talking on what you just spoke about. And I didn't realize you were like finance bro like that. So what are your thoughts on? Have you heard of SALT in general? Apparently, it's some finance thing in New York.
Yeah, I don't know jack shit about it. I've been out of finance now for 5 years. I know the SALT conference, but like I couldn't even tell you what it stands for.
What about the broad conceptual thing of like ufology and finance? Like, and there was a few months back, remember when Grush was speaking at that like billionaire conference and stuff like that?
Yeah, Goldman Sachs. He was talking to Goldman Sachs.
You have knowledge of both of those worlds. Who was he talking to?
I was talking to Goldman Sachs in New York. Check me in the comments on that, people, but I believe it was like a get together of like Goldman Sachs. But yeah, that was a little, I mean, guys got to make livings, but that was a little weird. That was a little, I would definitely ask him about that, like before we even got on camera, like, all right, what's the speaker circuit thing? You know?
Yeah.
Why are you talking to these guys? And it might be as innocent, like, hey, you know, they paid whatever, which, you know, this is America. Go make money, I guess. But, you know, if you're leading with the seriousness of the cause, sometimes I think there is a responsibility in that case. And it's easy for me to say because I've never been a leader of a cause like that. So I got to say that. But like, I think there's some sort of responsibility to lead with the cause as the priority over your financial gains based on how you get that done, if that makes sense. It's a bad way of explaining it, but
yeah. I could see though too, like you kind of need it, right? Or if we're going to get it to the level where it's like all out in the open, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you do need big business to like be on board, kind of, or like it sucks, but I don't know. But here's that clip of what Carl.
Guys, can I go take a piss real fast?
Yeah. Yes.
Be right back.
Dude, Grush going to that Goldman Sachs thing, or at least the very least finance bros, is super weird. I think what Julian was talking about, right, was the idea that like if you're going there to talk about your experience, cool, but if you're going there to push a narrative about what this thing is, that's kind of strange, right? To be taking these like speaker requests, to be kind of ushering in as a spokesperson, dictating what this thing could be. Not sure though. Not sure. I'd like to be a fly on the wall to all these things, because you got to wonder what kind of questions are these guys asking, these uber rich guys, and do they leave these meetings going and paying for like $1 million bunkers to be built? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's going on? What's the vibe afterwards?
Yeah, I bet, huh? I don't know. I can
the thought leaders,
man. Because you need to get big business on board if to move stuff, right?
Real quick, we're gonna play a little music while Julian gets back.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the bathroom too.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Go back. Let's see it.
This is Sky Fire News, the best UFO show on the internet. Skyfire News is on the internet. Skyfire News. Skyfire News.
All right. Okay, Red's now he's going to the bathroom. But welcome back, Julian.
Yeah, I did not realize how bad I had to piss. Holy shit, there's a lot in there.
We've been talking for like an hour and a half. We'll probably close out in the next like 20 minutes or so, whenever however much time you got. But yeah, all the interviews you've done on the UFO topic, I think a lot of them have groundbreaking things brought into them. Like we can pull out a lot of nuggets. With the Nick Pope episode, this guy is really into the Rendlesham Forest case, right? And I've heard so many different things about that case, from like the hieroglyphics that were etched onto the side of the pyramid itself, to the effects that took place on like the soldier who like saw him and touched him, right? There's always these weird aftershock events with witnesses, right? And I'm not sure how familiar you are with like all the different types of cases or not, but like when it comes down to like the hitchhiker effect or whatnot, like have you ever spoken with like Bustamante about these things?
The hitchhiker effect?
Yeah, have you ever heard of this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so the hitchhiker effect is essentially like if you have a paranormal experience or see a UFO or have a sighting of any kind, afterwards there's your kind of reality's in such a plastic kind of state because you don't really, your baseline's gone, you know what I mean? That like you notice a lot of more paranormal things like synchronicities,
right?
Weird kinds of bad luck. For instance, Jesse Michaels went to Skinwalker Ranch, right? And in an interview with Diana Pasolka, he was talking about how when he got there, like he didn't see anything strange, but he did start to smell sulfur. Right, like,
right.
And he didn't, and there was someone with a sulfur like sensor in the area who was like, "There's no sulfur here," but that's a common experience. It's almost like it's common in demonic experiences too, which is strange. He said that, so he went home and he went on to have like the worst month of his entire life, and he said that he came out of it a better person, but it was still like he don't know if it sparked, that experience, but something happened, and it's kind of a common thing. You know what I mean? Something's following people home. Something's changing. When people go into these areas, something happens.
Yeah, I think this is relatable to a lot of different things. I think people get like this whenever it comes to any form of religious thing, which you can certainly call aspects of ufology.
100%.
Yeah, and that's not really a compliment towards it, and it's something I'm always checking with this. But people, they want to believe, and they kind of prepare their mind for that. We've all done it in different things in our life, even stuff that's not like a religious cult type stuff, but things that we want to manifest or things that we believe to be true, right? Like I remember probably the most memorable thing I ever learned in college was the first day of Marketing 101. They taught us that the easiest thing to form and the hardest thing to break in a human being is an attitude. When someone forms an attitude on something, getting them off that, it becomes a part of their identity and who they are. And so they can lose logic, and they can also create confirmation bias. And I think what you're talking about with the hitchhiker effect, there's absolutely an aspect of confirmation bias to it that we are all susceptible to, myself included. I can think of examples where I've probably done shit like that. But I do always I take pride in the idea that I always check myself on things after the fact, right? And sometimes I try to do it preemptively to be like, okay, it's like I was talking to you earlier about my emotional response to something at first, and then I calm down, and then I look at it, I make myself draw the pros and the cons, if you will, and I look at it a little more logically, which is the second thing, right? My brain goes emotional first, but I'll work the logic in. I think with something like a hitchhiker effect, maybe that's not being done. Maybe people are like, oh my God, here we are. We're here. Let's fucking go. Oh my God, is that sulfur? You know, like I know Alex Jones is like going around like Obama, smell like sulfur, right? He's like totally like, he smells terrible. But it's not. Is that really the case? Probably not. You know, he's probably getting that effect.
Mm-hmm. Would you ever interview Alex Jones?
You know, I've gotten this question like 3-4 times, and I think it's an evolving answer. I've said no because he's already been on everything. Like, he doesn't need to talk to me. But I do really, I'm very curious in the range of opinions. I do kind of have a line on both sides. Like, if you're left of here or right of here, I know what you're going to say before you say it. It's just not that interesting to me. I would kind of put him in that box. He is wildly entertaining. He's very funny for sure. Like, when I see clips come up, I'm watching. You know, he's funny like that. Maybe I would. I have said no on the other podcasts I've appeared on, but I change my mind on things. I know Jesse's interviewed him. I think I did say on one of the podcasts that, like, when I talk with Jesse, I'll definitely ask him about that experience. And, you know, if it made sense, I'd do it. But again, like, he's like one of the most famous people in the country. Like, he doesn't need me for sure. It would be much more for me and my entertainment than, you know, getting him something. But he's a fascinating character for sure.
Excluding The Godfather, what's your like top 3 mobster movies?
Oh my God. Oh, that's so hard. Well, Goodfellas is in there. The Departed is not a mobster movie. It's Irish mob, so I don't count that the same way. But
it's so good.
It's so good. It would, of course, be in there. Like, that's one of my favorite movies.
And it's Scorsese. Like, you can't like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard not to marry those two things.
It is. That's Goodfellas is in there. I'm always, like I said, this is the kind of shit when I'm on the spot. Like, I'll think of one later. I'll be like, why the fuck didn't I say that? I love Casino. It was a little drawn out, but Casino was excellent. Another Scorsese one.
Brutal.
Yep. And like, you're just going movies right now. You're not going shows, right?
Yeah, we'll make it easy. We'll just stick it to movies.
Yeah.
Well, what show are you thinking though?
Well, there's a couple that come to mind. Of course, Sopranos, which I think is the greatest show ever made. But Boardwalk Empire was another one that was before its time. It was fucking incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It was, as a history buff and someone who was originally like a history buff of that period, bro, they ate on that one.
They did.
That
you
was
get Capone in the mix, dude.
Oh my God.
Dude, the historical like elements in it that you get to really pull from it is really, really good. That's what I got from Casino too, right? I mean, to some extent, The Irishman, but I don't know about that one. But like, you know what I mean? It's good to have that in there.
Yeah, there's something about when I was talking with a guy the other day about this, that there's something about when they work the family into it. And as Coppola said while he was making The Godfather, he's like, I want people to smell the spaghetti. When they do that right, it hits. They did that with Goodfellas. I mean, you think about Goodfellas, you think about them chopping the onion and putting it in the fucking sauce.
Oh, like the razor blade garlic, it dissolves. I
can smell the garlic.
You think about Paulie in his backyard eating the dish that was just handed to him, looking like your uncle from Brooklyn. You know, there's a family. It's about family first. It's a story of Henry and his wife, so it's relatable, and they just happen to be in the mob. The Sopranos is a story about a 40-year-old guy going through a midlife crisis whose kids are both in puberty and driving him nuts, and he wonders if he loves his wife, and he's a little bit depressed, but he happens to be in the mob. It's like the mob is the backstory. The Godfather is a story about the dark side of American capitalism, and it just happens to be people who are in the mob, right? It's a story about a father and a son and the legacy and the darkness of that legacy and how it goes the wrong way and how it affects the rest of the family, right? So the movies that do that get something done that the movies that just, you know, shoot everybody up don't. And that's why I think Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 are the greatest 2 movies ever made. They're perfect pictures. And it's because Coppola brought that aesthetic to it. I mean, it was genius what he did.
Yeah, for sure. Like that John Travolta Gotti movie, I think is an example of one where it doesn't have that. And it has like all the other stuff, but it doesn't have that. You could smell it, feel the family stuff.
Yeah, that one wasn't the best. Also, I see someone saying Donnie Brasco in the comments. Completely agree. Great movie. And
Oh.
Once Upon a Time in America is an underrated fucking movie. So good. So good. Yeah.
We also got this question in Jason Sands. Are you familiar with this?
You know, I haven't looked deeply enough into this. I know Darcy has been talking about this with me. James has mentioned some stuff, but I don't want to speak out of turn. It's like one of those things where I'm like, I'll get to this. I know people were arguing about it online, so this is not something I've really dug into a ton yet. I know the backstory, but not enough to be like, oh, here's my opinion.
You should definitely ask James about it next time we get him on. Basically, the TLDR was this guy first got kind of exposed unintentionally by James when he posted this thing. That might be, is that a Leslie's hand that we're looking at? Maybe, who knows?
Not that one, but yeah.
So then people look this guy up, figure out he's a quote unquote whistleblower, intel guy, and then he went on a Twitter space a few weeks back. Now, UFO intro shout out, did a great job hosting, and yeah, there was all this weird like stuff about it, this weird gatekeeping stuff, and an interesting thing right there I put up that James said was, as a citizen, I never imagined I would be limited to what I can share right now. I want full transparency, but I risk being thrown out of the circle if I say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Quite frustrating. Please give me time.
I saw that. Yeah.
That was huge when I saw it. I was like, damn, that's a shots fired. And it was like a response to like a week old thing too. So he had been thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's such a weird spot. And like I said, I feel for James. James kills it. So many things, right? He's we're seeing him in Brazil with a gun in his face. We're seeing him dealing with the disclosure narrative. Yeah, I guess if you don't know him that much, we can't really go into it, but that's a little background for you for when you do talk to him. For what I can tell, Jason Sands seems cool. Seems like one of the people Grush was talking to.
I know James in my conversations with him, and I think this is good. I think this is why he's good at his job. He wrestles all the time with the, where are government people actually really having their heart in the right place versus where are people doing a job. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier. And, I think it's important that James isn't a guy who just hears that Jack climbed a beanstalk and believes it, right? He really does question some things. Does he want aliens to be true? Does he believe in the phenomenon 100%? Yes. And some people could say, oh, so you have a foregone conclusion. No, I think it's kind of like I say, like, what are the mathematical probabilities that there isn't life out there? It's like virtually impossible. So I think that's fine. But I think on the way to then explaining the means to that end, that's where people can go wrong. And I think James, does a lot more good than bad in that respect. And so I remember when he sent out this tweet again, that was like me going like, all right, I'll look at this at some point soon. But like, that's how he looks at stuff. And like, he will, a guy like Chris Mellon, who a lot of people have questions about, righteously so.
Mm-hmm.
He does trust things that Chris Mellon says. He knows them very well. And like, I know he still wrestles with that. And I won't go through all some of the other people you could say that about, but he wrestles with that, just like Darcy wrestles with Tim Gallaudet. And, how much of that is he's saying this versus like he's being told to say this. It's a question. It's unfortunately, put on your hard hat and walk on the job. We're moving some cement today and some people are going to get it spilled on their leg. It's just how it is. It's a part of the territory.
Well, we didn't make this system of secrecy, you know what I mean? And like, we'd have to kind of exist in it.
That's
and
right.
Kind of like feel it as it goes. We can't walk into every or out of every meeting assuming we were told the truth about something that's been hidden almost on every single level, from academia to even social, and cultural. It's been hidden for 80 years. So yeah, like there's going to be some issues. Is this the first time you ever heard about this circle, this inner circle?
That
Fox, he mentions in the he risks being thrown out of the circle if he says the wrong thing.
Yeah. In this, no, I mean, this is what he's always kind of talking about and alluding to. I don't know if he's ever used that word or like that phrase. I mean, maybe he has with me, but I don't want to say he has if he hasn't. But like, you get access to certain things, and that's the danger. That's why he wrestles with it. It's like, okay, getting access to stuff that's very juicy, very interesting. But why am I getting access to it? And there's some stuff that he doesn't run with because it's too like, he's like, no.
Yeah.
You know, when you get the gut feel where it's like, no, this is off. It doesn't mean his gut feels right when it's off or when he thinks it's on. He's a human being. But as far as someone, you know, I thought his Rogan appearance last April, you know, when he really got in his bag in the last hour of that and just went on a rip. Like, if you remember that, for like 20 minutes, just going through basically the entire history of ufology, just boom, 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 boom. And they got emotional towards the end of it, talking about some of the witnesses and stuff. That's not acting in any way. That's James Fox, man. Like love him, hate him, agree with him, disagree with him. He's going to tell you what he thinks, and he's going to show you how he feels. And that's why a lot of people do love him and respect him. And like, I think he's contributed more than anyone else from a filmmaking perspective to the field.
100%.
He's the greatest UFO filmmaker ever.
Yep.
You know, and I don't think he gets the respect he deserves. And hopefully, you know, especially after all this bullshit that just happened to him, and now
with the studio.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was horrible,
bro.
Dude.
And Darcy too, right? It affected both of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It affected Ron James. You know, Ron James came on my show last summer. His documentary jumped to number 2 on the charts, and he saw none of the money. James Fox came on my show. The episode went nutty, and then when he went on Rogan a month and a half later, it went absurd. He saw none of the money.
Wow.
And the whole backstory, like, we'd be here for a long time going through that, but like, I remember the first time it was an issue, which when James first talked about it was maybe about 2 weeks after being on Rogan. And I just had this sinking feeling because he's such a positive guy. He's like, no, it'll work out.
Oh.
And in my gut, I'm like, oh, I've seen this before. This is how it starts. And like, those people, I hope they all go to prison. And I hope when he comes on and we finally do this, we've had to cancel it a couple times, but you know, because he's been making this next documentary. But I think James is gonna. I think he's gonna go and really fill people in on that when he's on the show, and I hope he does. I don't want to guarantee that to people. I want to be clear. I don't want to like give a teaser that then doesn't happen. There's a possibility he won't, but you know, because there's a legal aspect to it. But that, knock on wood, has been getting worked out, and you know, it is what it is. He had to leave a lot of money behind, though, a lot of money that he earned. So this next documentary has been a revenge tour for him. He has put his heart and soul into this. Some of the rough cuts I've seen, and by rough cuts I mean, you know, 3 minutes here, 4 minutes there. It's nothing. I've probably seen about 15 minutes of the documentary. It's a lot longer than that. It looks fucking good.
The program.
Yep. And the name is sick. He
It
texted me.
is
He's like, I'm thinking the program. And I'm like, do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's it. Don't get off that. 2 words. Love it. Let's go. It's sick.
Now, his film Moment of Contact, it was blowing up. I think it had more clicks on it, or it was. Let's put it this way. I think it was in second place in terms of like streaming services.
It was literally behind Avatar.
Behind Avatar.
Mm-hmm.
So the studio cleaned up. They milked that film as a cash cow. And could you imagine being a UFO documentarian, right? And having your film be like basically number 2 on streaming services next to James Cameron's Avatar 2, who's everyone's been waiting for the film. I don't know about waiting, it might be a strong word, but for like 13 years, dude. Like, and then at the end of it, you can't
even be happy with the success. Like every point that's good, it's like,
it's gone. The money's gone. He's
my stomach, it gets in knots when I think about it.
And here's the thing people got to know about James, because people will be like, oh, he'll recover, you know, shit like that. James was so about this. He's a brilliant guy, obviously a brilliant filmmaker. He was broke for like 30 years. It was like 29 years. He started when he was 21. He didn't see any money until he went on Rogan in December 2020 with Jacques Vallée, because Rogan saw the phenomenon and knew it was incredible. It was the best. I think that's the best UFO documentary ever made. And James he talked about it on the podcasts I did with him, 138 and 139, but then actually in between the podcasts, that day when we were recording, there's like 15 minutes of him talking about that I put on Patreon back then, talking about the process of making the phenomenon and the things he did to sacrifice to do that. And this guy, like, people use the term blood, sweat, and tears a little liberally these days. Blood, sweat, and tears with him. Like, he's such an, when I was at dinner with him that night, I remember just being like, you're such an inspiration for me. It puts everything I'm doing, and I'm working my balls off, sacrificing my health, doing what I'm doing. You've done it for so long. And you're so positive, and so he's the happiest person, one of them I've ever met in my life. And I'm just like, it's an amazing, amazing thing that you've always had this. And so when the light is taken from a creator, when I see that happen, where like I saw it with him, like I saw real anger from him, which I didn't even know he was capable of. Like, and I mean, James's anger is like me on a Tuesday, but you know, it's still like James getting pissed off, and I hear it in his voice. It breaks my heart to hear it because I know what he's put into this, and again, he was so trusting of some of these people just to be good people and do the right thing, and they didn't. And so, you know, I want this next. I hope Rogan brings him on and promotes the shit out of this documentary. I know I'll do it from a much smaller lens, but I hope everyone brings him on and promotes it. And I hope he gets what he deserves, because I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach, all that he had to leave on the table. And he like was literally, yeah. I'm not going to go beyond that, but like shit got bad for James as a result of this, because it's like you run your business on the expectation of cash flows. James is spending a lot of money on this next documentary because he likes doing it the right way. So he was spending money that then didn't come in. You know, that's a problem.
Well, I know that he's amassed a lot of fans from the work he's put in.
Yeah.
And I know that this event, you know, it hasn't lost him any fans. I think everyone's going to really show out for him. That's my prediction.
I think so.
You know, I see a lot of people buying copies. You know what I mean? I see a lot of people, you know, supporting James through this, because he is a beloved creator. We do think he's the best.
A pillar, I'd say, of the whole community and movement.
He is.
Yeah.
He's a standard. He's a gold standard for what everyone's trying to do.
And it deserves to be said. I've even had some conversations with Darcy about this, you know, and he's been more reserved about it. But he's pissed, of course.
Yeah.
And I've had long conversations with Ron James about it, who was, to Ron James's credit, Ron knew day one. Like when the first time they tried some shit, he was telling me like, oh, this is done. Like, this is fucked. Like, we're never going to see this money. Like, he knew it and has been all over it and wants to go scorched earth. And, you know, I think he should.
He should, dude. So many people I think even Greer got caught up in this.
Yep.
And then just even like, because that company does a bunch of non-UFO stuff too, right? Like hundreds of people and like other niche topics of documentary films got affected.
It sounds like it was, you know, and again, I've been getting it all from the outside from these guys. I'm not getting the legal documents to be able to sit here and give you the full educated analysis. But like, it sounds like a typical Ponzi scheme. That's like, I don't know how these guys aren't in chains yet. And I hope that's how it ends. Because I mean, they've committed fraud.
Yeah, totally agree.
Millions.
Yes, tens of millions. Once you put together all the creators, it's tens of millions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they deserve jail time for that. That's fucking garbage.
Yeah.
Garbage.
Yep. And then we did get this super chat. Let's go ahead and hit the thing. Let's see where you at. I'll find a tuba.
You got this.
But a lie detector test determined that was a lie. So nowadays I'm all about the fatty. You better get some. Too busy hating, they ain't getting none. Me, I'm all about the fatty. They getting none. Me, I'm all about the fatty. Yeah, they ain't ready for me. So nowadays I'm all about the fatty. You better get some. Too busy hating, they ain't getting none.
Forgot that loop button was checked. It played twice. Beats and Meats. Shameless plug, Julian. If you haven't seen Red Panda Koala's documentary on the Colaris UFO flap, you gotta watch it. It's amazing.
Send it my way.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. That case
definitely
is wild,
check it out.
bro.
It's a three-parter. It's got great thumbnails.
You made the thumbnails back in the day.
Love that.
Isn't that crazy? Way back in the day, I was like, Red, let me make your thumbnails for this, dude. I'm down. I'm down.
That's awesome.
All
right, I will check that out. That'd be cool.
No, well, you guys want to check out some of these Carl Nell clips, then probably call it a day?
Yeah, let's do that. I gotta run.
Cool.
No, 1 second. Boom. So this was what he was saying, like the reasons why They don't disclose. Let's see. Boom, boom.
There's 6 basic reasons, and this, again, you could draw this out from first principles. There's a national security reason. There's the lack of a plan. There's the potential for societal disruption. There's the possibility that there's some non-public agreement. There's the potential for misdeeds and the desire to cover up misdeeds. And there's just the basic organizational intransigence and lack of priority that might be associated with the topic. All these things are factors. The issue is that really the national security issue subsumes all the others. And so there's an opportunity maybe to contract the national security issue, similarly to what was done with nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, such that nuclear energy is not necessarily classified and is available to the public. But lack of a plan and the potential for societal disruption are key ingredients that would prevent any responsible leader from coming forward with information that they don't have the means to address in a responsible way. It would be irresponsible to do that.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have absolute conviction that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet, that there are factions within our own government that know about this, yet we still don't have a plan, and they may represent a security issue. This may pose a threat to humans, yet you still believe that we should disclose. Is that right?
Correct, right.
I think this is where he goes into a little more of that. Let me see.
It's rather matter of fact.
Yes. A lot of that at the SALT conferences. I'm
yeah.
Wait, I don't know where I'm at. Sorry, I have a bunch of windows open. But yeah, he was very matter of fact, almost like autistic with it in a good way.
I mean, it's definitely going to have its effect on society. That's for damn sure. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, but I always wonder, like, is it what we think it is, or is it something so different? Like, because we all think we know what it is.
We all think we know,
you know,
but we don't.
Yeah, I don't even think the government really knows.
Dude, I'm all in on the Rosicrucian demons, aliens, angels thing. So I just wait for
we're
that
gonna be here
off.
for another 3 hours if we go down that.
No, we won't crack that open. We'll wait till next time for sure.
As well, just real quick too. People were talking about this one when he was asked for it. What evidence does he have of this stuff?
What?
Watch his body language. Let's see.
You've seen, what was the moment where you developed this level of conviction? Because what you're saying is extremely consequential and very important. And I know that a lot of people here even perhaps may not believe that statement.
We can look at some folks that have very high level access to information, like Paul Hellyer, who was the defense chief for Canada.
Whoa.
Said the same thing. We can look at Ham Eshed, the head of Israel's, or former head of Israel's.
Whoa.
Has said the same thing. Chris Mellon, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intel, SAPCO, has essentially said the same thing. Lou Elizondo has said the same thing. David Grush has said the same thing. David Grush cleared for presidentially level material. So you're looking at people that are in a position to know this, and they're telling you the same thing. You could take a look at the Gang of Eight in the Senate and in Congress. So there's 2 members of the Gang of Eight, Marco Rubio and Senator Chuck Schumer, that signed up to the UAP disclosure amendment last year that basically said they're not being told the truth and we need to push forward on that. So that's sort of an overview of some of the data.
So, I don't know. It was a cool speech. Everyone was hyped for it. For people who don't know, Julian, I don't know if you know, he was on the UAPTF, so he was kind of like a Grush level dude when they made this in 2021, and they were basically tasked by the Congress to investigate a lot of these claims.
I want to see the whole. I want to see the whole thing.
Yeah,
I have to go watch that
for sure. It's one of those ones that it's worth watching because it was huge. And Grush was actually supposed to be there, but then he backed out, and so then Carl now replaced him. He's also part of that Soul Foundation. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Cool.
The Soul Foundation. Now, he referenced Paul Hellyer, right? Who said that he thinks that there's like 20 different alien species the human beings are in contact with, and that, you know, all this stuff has gone down from mantids and whatnot. Like, Paul Hellier's a Canadian defense minister, right? And then the Israeli guy he referenced is the guy who said there was a galactic federation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you start talking about all these different people at all these different governments together, that starts to make me go,
right?
That's when I look at Bustamante and go, really? Really? Come on, buddy. Come on. I
think that's a healthy way to look at it.
I want to see everything the guy said.
Yeah.
Like I just saw 2 clips right there. I want to see everything the guy said. His body language is very interesting during that one.
Right? And people have been waiting to hear him talk for a while. I think he did give a talk at the Seoul conference as well. But I think it's safe to be skeptical. I love the way you look at this phenomena. I like the way you cover it. The people you talk to are super interesting, even on the tertiary level. You know what I mean? Like getting ancient civilizations and new tech, and is the pyramid a power plant? We don't know. And what, you know what I mean? All this stuff is awesome. Keep on doing it. We're going to continue to be fans. And Julian, dude, until next time, bro. Like,
hey, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys promoting the podcast. That's really awesome.
Absolutely.
It was awesome to have you on, bro. I know we kind of met under weird circumstances, but I feel like
we did.
I feel like it's all cool. I don't know. Like that whole thing was actually really me trying to like look out for everyone involved. Kind of like what you were saying, like try and be a mediator.
I know. I know you guys were trying to be peacemakers there, and I think you did a pretty good job. You know,
hell yeah. We can.
That's fine. I'm never gonna argue with that.
Hell yeah.
Cool, man.
All right, bro. We'll see you out there.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
Have a good one. Bye.
All right. I guess it's just me. Red's gone. It's just me. So I'm going to exit out for y'all. Guys, amazing show. Thanks for popping in. Thanks for checking this out. We love talking to Julian. I think he's a great guy. I love what he's doing out there. And just until next time, we love doing these interview shows too. So if you guys have enjoyed this, please check out the John Majorowski one. Check out the Jay Anderson one we did with Project Unity. These are all going to be out there. We take these, we re-edit them and put them out if you guys are interested. Again, if you have questions for our next guest as we announce it, just pop it in the chat. Let us know. We'll be around. Thanks to all the members out there watching. Thank you guys for coming here. Please subscribe and like the channel. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is Skyfire News. I'm Tupacabra. Peace out.
This is Skyfire News, the best UFO show on the internet. Skyfire News is on the internet. Skyfire News. Skyfire News. UFO show on the internet. Skyfire News is on the internet.